Well, let's bring in Dave Sharma, the Liberal MP now. Dave, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. Well, we'll just back up a few stories there. I just want to get your thoughts on the Taliban. It continuing its march across Afghanistan at a frightening speed, picking up more and more provinces as it heads towards Kabul. I'll ask about that separately in a second, but what do you make of that march? Where is this going?
Look, it's deeply worrying. I mean, the Taliban is now in control of over half of Afghanistan's districts. They're actually, the towns they've taken over the weekend are actually in the north of Afghanistan, which has traditionally been a stronghold of anti-Taliban forces, the Northern Alliance and things like that. They've seized some of the key border checkpoints, and they've already announced a strategy to basically starve the central government in Kabul of revenue that comes from customs duties and whatnot. So it's a worrying sign. And look, undoubtedly the US and NATO withdrawal from Afghanistan has hurt pretty badly the morale of the Afghan national forces and the people, and it's hampered their ability to operate, particularly in the air, because they've got US platforms, US equipment, particularly their helicopters, which they can't service themselves. They're relying on contractors to service them, and it's hampering their mobility and their ability to take the fight to the Taliban. I think this should be of great concern to us and to other allies.
So what option is there? I mean, as we know, the war had been going on for so long, and the Americans in particular had been spending record amounts of money on it, which surely couldn't continue. But what needs to be done now?
Well, look, I think there's a halfway house. I mean, look, I know this has been, unfairly in my mind, titled a forever war within, foreign policy circles in Washington. But no US serviceman has died in Afghanistan for a couple of years. The cost financially, but also in terms of material and equipment of this commitment was quite low. And I just make the point, I mean, in countries like Japan and Germany and Korea, and even in Iraq today, I mean, there are thousands of US troops, some of them who have been there or have been there on rotation for several decades. This is the price sometimes of maintaining peace, to keep an ongoing presence. And the way the US presence had been configured now in Afghanistan, which was largely a train and assist mission based around Bagram Air Base, exposing them to a low amount of risk, but providing a huge, force multiplier and enabler for the Afghan national forces, was buying security at a very low price. And I really hope that the Biden administration reconsiders this decision. We saw, when President Obama came into office, he wanted to end the commitment in Iraq. When he did, Islamic State formed and threatened to take over Iraq and Syria, and he eventually decided to send US troops back in. And there's 2,500 troops in Iraq now, but they keep the Iraqi government stable. We need to do something similar in Afghanistan.
On to New South Wales and its fight against COVID. I mean, Gladys Berejiklian, and she's effectively given up on COVID zero. And the fact that Melbourne keeps bouncing in and out of lockdown, is it time to admit, Dave, that COVID zero is a fallacy?
Well, I don't think any country in the world has eliminated COVID Delta variant, and I think this is the main point. This is quite different to the Alpha variant, which was in itself a more infectious version of the original, the Wuhan variant. And I think it's, unless you go for an extreme sort of a lockdown, and I think it's like one that almost our political system and legal system could not tolerate here in Australia, I think the chances of eliminating it seem very difficult. So I think the pathway out is we need to contain it, we need to suppress it, and we need to save lives, but eliminating it could be very difficult, and we need to get the vaccination rate up.
So Gladys Berejiklian, and she's got this figure of 50% before she starts to ease some restrictions, and we're talking about, perhaps hairdressers being able to do their work and some other professions as well. What do you make of that marker? Because it's well below what the Doherty Institute had in mind. Would you be comfortable with that kind of vaccine rate while things start getting on and we live with the virus, or do you think it's too soon?
Well, look, the point is here, and the Doherty Institute makes the same point, this isn't a binary thing. It's not as if it's dangerous up to 70% and then completely safe thereafter. Every additional vaccination gives the community a higher level of protection, gives that individuals a higher level of protection, but it also provides a community with a higher level of protection. And so as that level of protection increases, you can presumably start to withdraw in a targeted and proportional way some of the protective measures you've got in place. Now, I think the Premier's been talking, and this makes perfect sense, about lessening some of the restrictions in some of the LGAs with a lower level of cases. So that means allowing schools to return and
Yep.
means allowing hairdressers to resume, which I'd certainly welcome right now. But any number of other things like that. And I think that makes sense. I mean, this is the response is going to have to be staged and proportionate, but it's not going to be as if one day we're closed and one day we're open, but we should be moving back towards that, I think, yes.
And just finally, I just want to ask you about interstate travel, and I spoke to Simon Birmingham about this a short time ago. I mean, is it something that you know, we all love to go interstate at Christmas time, but given the Delta variant and the fact that New South Wales is not going to get it back down to zero again until vaccination, well, it's just not going to get it back down to zero. Do potential travellers need to start thinking, well, that's unlikely to happen this year, we'll have to travel within the state?
Look, potentially, but I mean, I'd like to see National Cabinet has discussed this, that if you're fully vaccinated, you should be able to travel interstate without restrictions. I mean, that's certainly the pathway that the National Cabinet has laid out, at least once we get to phase C, which is 70% of Australians, eligible Australians, I should add, fully vaccinated, and 70% of the eligible Australians within a state. But I'm confident we can get there, you know, before Christmas, and certainly even quite a bit before that at the rate that we're going.
The problem is the premiers are so risk averse, though.
Yeah, look, I know they have been, and partly they reflect public mood and public opinion here, but the National Cabinet, which means the state premiers, have signed up to this roadmap, and so I hope they honour it, because, you know, we're all making plans, and businesses are making plans.
But National Cabinet, it can be outdated within 2 hours of it finishing, Dave.
Well, I mean, the National Cabinet is only as good as our federation, and as we've learnt through this, our federation has strengths, but it has weaknesses, and look, states are still king when it comes to border closures and quarantine and public health measures. Our constitution leaves most of those powers with them. So ultimately, you know, we can cajole and persuade and seek to convince premiers of what we think the best direction is as a national government, but they have a high degree of independence in these areas.
Yeah. Hey, your hair looks all right, Dave. Just so you know. Talk to you soon. Good to chat.
Thanks, Pete. Good to chat.